Hi, this is Emery at Martha O'Brien, and today we're going to talk about long division. So if you're like me, you might have slight heart palpitations when you hear long division, but I want to let you know that this is not too scary, and you can definitely achieve it. Plus, you have the great advantage of having a calculator. A calculator is good for being able to check your answers, for being able to calculate, and it's a tool that you're going to have available on the HiSET. So I highly recommend that you become familiar with that tool and that you use it regularly. So if we have a calculator, why learn long division? Well, it's going to come in handy when you look at fractions, and in general, knowing how numbers work and relate to each other is going to be very essential for when math gets more and more difficult. So take the time to learn steps and processes such as in long division, and it'll only set you up better to have more advanced number sense and to be more prepared for harder math down the road. So, all that being said, let's get into it. Chances are when you think of a division problem, you think of something like this. This, of course, is 9 divided by 3. What is this saying? Well, this is basically saying that if we start with 9 objects, 9 of something, and then we put it into groups of 3, how many groups will we be able to make? Well, let's draw it out. Okay, there I have 9 hypothetical objects, and I'm going to count off 3 and make groups. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Okay, so if I start with 9 and I group it into groups of 3, I can make 3 groups. Well, it turns out that that's the answer to the division problem, because you can make 3 groups out of 9 when you're grouping it into groups of 3. Now, also, if you go in the opposite direction and you take 3 and you multiply it by 3, you're going to get back to your original number of 9. So, multiplication and division are very closely related. Okay. But what happens if I have a number that does not go evenly? Let's say, for example, that I have 10. I have one more object out there. Well, now I have 3 even groups still, but with 1 left over. So I started with 10, I made 3 even groups, and now I have just 1 remain. And we call this the remainder. And normally write it as capital R with however many are left, which in this case is 1. So the answer to 10 divided by 3 is 3, because there are 3 groups, and a remainder of 1. Okay, but let me ask you this. Can you do this backwards? The answer is yes, you can. Because in these 3 groups of 3, how many are there? Well, 3 times 3 is still 9. So in the 3 groups of 3, there's 9 plus the 1 left over. And you still get to 10. So long division is basically that exact same process of figuring out how many times you can group a number together and what's left over. It's just a little bit easier when you do it in long division because you don't have to draw it out. And so you can use it to calculate much bigger and more complex numbers. Let's take a look. If I was doing this same problem, 10 divided by 3, as a long division problem, I would simply take this number, the number that it's divided by, which is also called the divisor, and I would put it on the outside of the division symbol, which looks like this, kind of like a flat plane with a curvy arm at the end. And then I would take the other number, which is called the dividend. This is the number you are dividing, and I would put it inside the box. Basically, if this is a box and this is what you're unpacking, this is unpacking the number inside the box. So how many times does 3 go into 10? Well, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because you have to know your multiplication tables pretty well in order to do this. If I took 3 times 1, I only get 3, right? 3 times 2, I only get 6. 3 times 3, I get 9, and 3 times 4, I get 12. Okay, nowhere in there is the number 10. But 3 times 3 gets us close to 10 without going over. So it's kind of like the Price is Right. You want to get as close as you can without going over. So 3 times 3 is 9. So we're going to say, okay, this 3 times 3 is the key. So it goes in 3 times. And now if 3 times 3 is 9, then how many do we have left over? Well, what's the difference between 9 and 10? Hear that? The word difference means subtract. So now we'll just subtract the 2 and we'll get 1. The 3 that we wrote on the top is our answer, and the 1 that's left over at the bottom is the remainder. Okay, this might seem a little bit too simple, but let's try it with some bigger numbers and you'll see the same process applies. How about 3 into 47? Now remember, this is the same as 47 divided by 3, because the number we're dividing goes inside the box and the one we're dividing by goes on the outside the box. So how many times does 3 go into 47? And if you're like me, you have no idea, but we'll figure it out together. So let's start with the tens place, the 47. So 3 goes into 4 how many times? Well, 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. So the closest number without going over is going to be 1, because 3 times 1 is 3. So now we'll put that 3 down below and subtract to find the remainder. Once we have the remainder for the tens place, we can now calculate with the ones place. But we don't want to just leave the tens place alone or not account for it. So in order to account for the tens place, we're just going to draw the ones place, in this case the 7, down to line up with the tens place, and now we have a new number, 17. So how many times does 3 go into 17? Well, 3 times 4 we established is 12, 3 times 5 is 15, and 3 times 6 is 18. Okay, 18 is too high. So 15 is the closest we can get without going over, and that's 3 times 5. So now we'll put 5 on over the ones place. 3 times 5 is 15, and our remainder is 2. So our final answer, 15, remainder 2. Okay, let's try one more problem, this time a little bit more complicated, and see how we do. Let's try this one. 407 divided by 3. Don't be fooled by it being a longer number. The same process applies, and we can totally do it. So remember, take the number you're dividing by, put it on the outside of the box, and put the number you're dividing on the inside. So 3 goes into 407 how many times? Well, let's start with the 4 in the hundreds place. 3 goes into 4 one time. 1 times 3 is 3. We get a remainder of 1. Now we can pull down the tens place, which is a 0. How many times does 3 go into 10? Well, remember, it's 3 times. So 3 times 3 is 9. Our remainder is 1. And now we can carry down the 7 and we get 17, just like last time. How many times does 3 go into 17? Remember, we figured out that it was 5 times. So 5 times 3 is 15, and our remainder is 2. So our final answer, 135, remainder 2. See, that was a lot easier than drawing 407 and then grouping it into 3 and counting. Okay, so now you're ready to try some of your own long division. But first, a warning. Be careful to write neatly, because if you kind of get off track, then you might get disorganized and forget where you are. Let's say I do something like this. I might get confused and pull down the wrong number. if I'm not keeping the numbers directly aligned beneath each other. So be careful to write neatly, write on the lines, and stay organized, and that'll be your best help in long division. So now it's your turn. You got this.